Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Not Quite Strangers. My name is Valerie Hope. I am your host, and I'm so happy that I have so many awesome people in my life. And some have been there for a long time, some for a short time, but all in all, they all make a huge impact. So this podcast is all about bringing and encouraging your curiosity, building connection. And we also want to shake things up by challenging how you interact with strangers. So I have a handful of strangers today. I don't typically have a handful, so this is a special moment for everybody. I would like to, first of all, start off by introducing Daniel Todd, my yoga instructor, my very favorite yoga instructor. Daniel, back in the day when I was practicing on a regular basis, and I think after this conversation, you might encourage me to get back on that mat.
Yes.
Because I'm like, the amount of guilt that I feel for not having done so in such a long time.
No guilt. No guilt.
But Daniel, I want to say you and I met maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
5 years ago, when I wandered into the yoga movement yoga studio, and I think you were doing a restorative yoga class or something, which I'd never heard of. But you were so loving and caring and skilled, and you used lavender oil on my forehead or something. I was like,
it. Nice.
I must come back. Wow, 5 years ago. So that happened. And I know you have a background in music. And so I had the beautiful opportunity about 3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, to meet this couple who have wandered in and out of my church, Unity on Greenville, several times. And okay, Randall and Kristin, I'm going to be honest here. I don't think I've ever shared this with you guys. Anytime they said, hey, we had the Bakhti House Band coming in to perform, I was like, sounds like a lot. I don't think I'm going to go.
It is a lot.
It was just like, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it for whatever reason. Nothing. I didn't know anything about the band. I'd never heard of it. I knew nothing about it. I just remember like the buildup was a little much. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to go out of my way on a Sunday or whatever to come back to church to do that. Right. And luckily I didn't have to, because y'all came back on a Sunday morning where I had no choice but to be there. And it was blissful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you all produced wonderful music. And I first, like I said, I didn't know what it was until I experienced it. And it's one of the types of music that you want to experience. And then the best part though, wasn't even the music. It was afterwards where you guys were setting up or taking stuff down. And Kristin, you and I chatted for like 2 hours or something.
4 hours.
We talked forever. And Randall was just like, all right, we got to go. Why are you talking to this lady so much? Come on, keep it moving.
It's her job. That's her job. I have my job. She has her job.
Very good. Chat up the crowd.
She's a talker.
And why I thought this matchup would be so phenomenal is because, as musicians, Randall, you and Kristin put together it's not just music to entertain, but it's movement. There's a sense of movement in your music, internal, inspirational movement. And I know Daniel, not only being a yoga instructor, you understand movement, but you're also very talented musician and choir director, and I think play the piano, and I don't know, you're a gifted musician. And I thought, what better way than combine these two worlds, the yoga meditation world with music, and ta-da, here's the matchup. So thank you. Welcome to podcast Not Quite Strangers.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Yay.
You. I'm excited about this.
I always ask the guests, first of all, because I think it's important for people to know what it's like to meet someone new on a public forum. I always like to ask people, why did you say yes to being on a podcast to meet people you don't know?
That's a great way to start. I think just opening myself up to new experiences and to new people. And to be honest too, for me, knowing how kind and warm and gentle you are, I know that you would bring me into a space where I'm going to receive that same thing from whoever I'm speaking with. Mm-hmm. So kind of like even we were talking about just as we were getting settled is living in a big urban city like Dallas. I've been here for 9 years, and sometimes I'm like, I only know the people that are directly in front of me. And I feel like even after 9 years, it's been a hard place for me to get to know people. So I love this concept of like bringing together people that, as we've already said, like we should know each other and we don't. We have so much in in similarities in people we already know, but our paths just haven't crossed. So that's like wonderful to see, like just how interconnected we are when we take that moment to open our eyes or to stop and like have that conversation, like you said with Kristin. Yeah, like what possibility exists when we stop and slow down and let life evolve instead of plan everything out.
I'm not going to tell too much, but you have planned some things. There's balance for you.
There is totally balance for me.
So I am grateful that you said yes, giving yourself opportunity to connect with people. And Randall and Kristin, what had you say yes? Because I'm really a stranger. Like we literally just talked, and I was avoiding you listening to your group for years. So what? I wasn't avoiding it, but I did
everything in perfect time,
right?
And to kind of piggyback off of what Daniel said. I mean, it's like yes, everything you said, and then also, like when I went to stalk your Facebook to go, okay, what's this guy about? Who is he? Like, how is it that we don't know him? To see that we've got like 60 something friends in common.
Wow.
And close friends, like, not just random people, like, people that really mean a lot to me. And it reminds me of how, in those moments, when you fall into that limited mindset, that there's always expansion just right under your nose. Like it's just right there, and just the perfect little tweak, and an opportunity to expand our connection, and just to expand our hearts. Because to me, every time we meet someone new, especially usually in the yoga and spiritual worlds, there's going to be an expansion within the heart, because it's like meeting yourself in another form, and or the best parts of yourself. And so this is really exciting because it came through unity, and not through the yoga world, and that just goes to show how everything's interconnected. And I love that. I love connecting with people. That's my thing.
That's lovely. I love that, meeting yourself in another form. That's what we're doing. And Randall, I mean, obviously you and Kristin are married, but why did you say yes to something that Kristin and I were plotting?
I say yes.
Are you here on your own accord? Blink once.
I just go along. I go along with whatever she sets up. That's. I know she has my best interest in mind and heart. So yeah, even if it's uncomfortable, I just go, and you just do it. That's put yourself out there.
Because he's a little bit more. I mean, we're both like, I'm like an extroverted introvert, and he's like an introvert.
Yeah.
Unless you get him up on the stage, and then he's like. Whoa.
And that's where a lot of the expansion and breakthroughs come. If you put yourself out there, you have no choice but to expand. And how uncomfortable it is. Yeah, definitely. For sure. So I said yes because.
So you said yes. And for Randall, what do you hope to get out of this? Having said yes to Kristin's invitation to do this.
Just another perspective and like connection.
New friends.
Yeah. It's that's really what it's about. We went to a meeting a while back. We were doing some classes, and we have merchandise and CDs and everything, and you think about all that and you plan in advance. We're going to teach this and all that, and then before we went, we just said, you know what? It doesn't matter what happens today, as long as we connect. No matter what, connection is above all of it. And we had the most amazing, free-flowing. There were challenges, but we just kind of stepped back and said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about that. let's just connect.
And the challenges like work themselves out.
They work themselves out.
It was really weird. It was.
And yeah, ever since then, I mean, it's been like on the cosmic whiteboard. It's just connection. That's what it's all about.
Connection. Ah, that resonates so deeply for me. Yes. And I find that when I get in my head too much, trying to organize and plan and control all the things.
Girl, you're talking to a Virgo rising, so I get
it. My sun sign's Aquarius, and I don't know anything else. But freedom's important to me too. But freedom usually because I say how it's going to go for me and others. Freedom for me to get my way. So no, this is absolutely a treasure. We've already alluded a bit to Randall and Kristin, alluded to your music, but I think for the listeners, they might need to know a little bit more about the origins or the inspiration for it. I'm happy to play a little bit if you prefer, but maybe you give us some context so people aren't left wondering, what is this music?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
I know.
Really?
Well, to me, every album that we create it continues to basically take everything up to now and we put it into music, our experience, because through that making connections, our hope and our intent is that as humans, we all share many of the same struggles, many of the same challenges, many of the same, there's lots of patterns in that way. And so our music, we hope it will bring you closer to the truth of who you are, is really the intention. Because it's how we've processed life. And basically I go through a struggle and he writes a song. It's like, you can, no matter where you are, we call it's like fifth dimensional music because it is about bringing the oneness. It doesn't matter where you are, in your 3D matrix of hell. There's a song that can break through and bring you out of it somewhere. Whether you're in, it's celebration. If you're in a dark place, there's a song. We intentionally put this music so that when you're in that space, you've got a way out. It's kind of like forging a path through music.
Forging a path through music. All right, Daniel, have you heard any of their music before?
I haven't.
Okay, I think we'll play like 30 seconds of something. Okay, so Randall, what should I play? I have the Roots to Revolution album queued up. What are we in the mood for?
I don't mind what first came to mind, because it's a very East meets West, because we're Sanskrit scholars, so we study Sanskrit and we love to bring meter, but we like to bring our Western flair in there as well. I was thinking Golden Shoes. Maybe if taking it, I don't know, it's about 5 minutes in, where it makes the transition from the English lyrics into the Sanskrit.
Okay, so you want me to play that particular moment, or?
Yeah, I mean it's
5 minutes in or so.
Yeah, I think about 5 minutes in. I'm guessing
I lose track of time in this music.
He goes into the time.
You're in the zone. No worries. Okay, I will find this. So I'll have you know that when one small thing, the reason I was listening to your music, which I listen to like when I can work, I can cook, it keeps me focused, it keeps me grounded. And I don't even know what's playing half the time. It's just like it helps me get into the zone, which is like, that's why that fifth dimensional really resonates for me. And there was some time, I don't know which song it was and what you were playing, but there was like this Om Shanti. And I remember Daniel doing that at the end of your yoga sessions. And I was like, Daniel's the one.
I love that.
That's literally how it happened. Cause I knew, Kristin and Randall, I need to have you on the podcast. I don't know who I'm going to match you up with. And then I heard that part of the song and I'm like, Daniel. That's how it happened. Okay. So let's hear some of this. All right. This is just the beginning of the song. There's something coming. You said 5 minutes in? I'm sure, right? Don't wanna be stuck, but here I am. Actually, I like the beginning too.
I've made
We'll give it a moment.
I just love his voice.
plans, but it's all been scattered around. Castles on a cloud, nowhere to ground. Now I wanna get out. I wanna move.
I'm gonna transition to another portion. Here we go. I can see myself chopping onions right here. All right. I know we can probably sit here and like, I felt myself going there. I'm like, no. You need to stay focused on the conversation. It almost took me away. It almost did.
Well, and all the songs are different. I always tell people, if you don't like that song, try something, hopefully there's something for everyone.
I like all the songs, but Daniel, I want to hear your reactions as you're hearing for the first time some Bakhti House Band music.
I love it. It totally reminds me of a lot of the music that I feel like I cut my yoga teeth on, if you will, like Jay Uttal and some my mind goes blank now, but it takes me back to some of those people that did exactly what you said, of that East meets West, and that like reinterpreting the traditional and the sacred in a way that's like accessible from our Western culture.
Which is our intention.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like going back to like what you were even saying of connection, like all having the same journey, I feel like I experience the same thing as a yoga teacher on the other side of it. Is sometimes as like musicians, you get to see that dialogue played out in people's faces or how they're singing along. And sometimes as a yoga teacher, I just get to see it through the eyes. Like the instrument, what I'm watching is the body, and maybe the body's not actually responding to the emotional level. So I have to read like sometimes very subtle cues. But I can remember some of those experiences when, like you were saying, I didn't have the beautiful song or the lyrics, but I had like whatever I was in the middle of, and sharing that through the lens of my yoga practice, and how like that struggle for 30 seconds in a pose could actually open up a new mental pathway or a new place for possibility. So I see that same, like, even the theme that you said earlier, I was reminded of like one light, many forms is something that the Indian tradition says a lot. And I see it in our own practices as well, is we're still practicing this same experience as a human being of connecting and observing on our own path, and realizing, like you said, Valerie, that it's like never really going to be perfect. Like we've got to let go of some things in there. So I love hearing like that through the lens of a song, and really the way you even explained it, Kristin, is it sounds like it's a journal. Like each album is like really related to a time period. Like just sitting and listening to that, I was like, there's clearly a story behind this. And if we had time, I would so love to hear like what brought that story about. And then I'm sure as well, Randall, that there's a tie-in to the sacred Sanskrit and how that all weaves its tapestry together.
Well, I say you answer the question in like a minute or less. Okay, give us a taste of the inspiration. What was the moment? Or
in a minute or less. Okay. No pressure. No. This was actually written as a friend asked me to write a song for her, and I was writing it, and she told me what she was going through and everything, and so I started writing it. And as I'm writing it, though, I'm realizing this is not just for her. This is our story as well. We've been there. And this one is about, basically the inspiration was, when you feel like you're always waiting on something better, then you never live right now. You never, and our Guruji, he said, he would always say, you don't have to pave the whole world in gold. We try to change the world out there. He says, just put your golden shoes on, and then everywhere you walk, it'll be gold under your feet. And so, and then of course the mantra goes along with that. Lead us from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, from death to eternal life, because in that moment is where the eternal is, and if you're living in the now, if you're always looking for what's coming, what could be better, then you're not here, and so that's really, the inspiration.
Well done.
Hopefully that wasn't too long.
I know it's a scratch of the surface. But I appreciate that. And that's definitely what I took away from the song. When it's not, I think it feels like I put the song on and the golden shoes just kind of come along with the song. Cause I'm like, I don't know where I'm going, but I feel good. I'm not sure where it's taking me, but it feels so good. Now, so here's my question to all three of you. What is it? Because all of you originally from Texas, yes? Right, originally from Texas, right? And Gen Xers-ish?
We are.
1981, I can't remember where that puts me.
Yeah, you're at the tail.
You're like at the tail end of Gen X.
I got a little both.
A hopeful millennial. So not necessarily, in the hippie movement per se, but so I'm curious about what was it that drew you to Sanskrit? What was it that drew you to the yoga culture? What is it that drew you to meditation, to create this type of music, to teach yoga classes? Like, what was it that drew you to these Eastern traditions to express yourselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like rock, paper, scissors?
We'll start with you, Daniel.
Okay. This is why we're such good friends, because I was thinking a similar question as well, is like, what in your background have you like left or turned away from, and how have you found like what that created for you in this present moment or where you are now? And I'm like, that's something that resonates with me, is the idea of how I grew up in a very religious background and tried that on when I was in my teen years, and it just wasn't a fit. It was so closed off to me, and I knew the world was a bigger place, even though I hadn't experienced it. Like, for instance, my grandmother was even a pastor's wife and passed away about 10 years ago when I moved to the area. And I remember at her funeral, everything was about Jesus and about God and through the lens of Christianity, which is wonderful. But I remember looking back for myself and saying, when I pass, I don't want all of the quotes to be from one person or to be from one sacred text. I want it to really speak more to this broader tradition of like, there's lyrics from Kristin and Randal that speak truth and speak about my life. And there's, passages from all sorts of great thinkers. So I've just wanted to be a very, I guess, more worldly in a way, or more open view. And so more global. And I think that's what yoga has done for me. Like, I came to it for the physical practice. And as soon as I started realizing that the physical was the way to actually access the spiritual, and I could have that broader view, and I didn't, even though I knew on the mental level that spiritual practice didn't have to exist in a room or didn't have to exist around all of these people at a given time, that was the gateway for me to actually like live and walk and be in the practice of a spiritual life. Is it gave me the tools to do it on my own, right? And it gave me the tools to do it in a way that was like so practical. Like, I find that Eastern tradition doesn't have like so many stories as well. Like, stories are great, but sometimes like just the nuts and bolts of it, like give me the Cliff Notes version, speaks like really well to me. And then I can bring my story, I can bring my experience to that.
All right, Randall and Kristin, I want your reactions.
Well, yeah, we're like one soul, because we had noticed that you would tell people to bring something. So we were like, well, she didn't say anything about us bringing something, just questions. And this is what we brought.
So I brought my favorite study Bible.
And I got the Ramayana here.
30 years.
And I love it because I think it's like exactly what you said, Daniel. Um, to me, the Eastern, I know for us, well, here, why don't you start? Because he was a PK. He was a little preacher's kid.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
His dad was a Southern Baptist preacher.
My entry point to spirituality was through basically Christianity, and I was Baptist. My dad was a Baptist, but he was a very open mind. He had a lot of questions, and it's the questions that drive us really. But he would ask questions in seminary, and they wouldn't have answers. That the professors wouldn't have answers for him. They would say, "You just don't. No, we just don't talk about that. You
That's
just
not in the curriculum.
That's under this sheet over here. And this is what we're talking about.
you just trust, and
Yes.
he had questions. He got
Yeah.
kicked out of many churches
Yeah.
because he did some unorthodox things, which really to me don't seem very unorthodox at this point. But
Did
to
you say he
them-
got kicked out of many churches?
Yeah, he was the preacher. They would bring him on, and he would.
Deacons.
They
didn't
have
like him.
deacons, basically the board of directors, and if they don't like you or what you're doing, then you're out of there. Basically.
Yeah.
And so he shook some things up, had questions.
Had a large church.
He did. He had a large church, and they basically told him, if you do it the way we do it, then you'll be successful. If you just follow what we would show, and he just couldn't do that. He wanted to follow his own heart, and so we basically over the years, it was kind of a progression. We studied the Bible, but there were we were studying the Greek and the Hebrew and Aramaic, and what do these words mean?
Yeah, it's like know for yourself.
Why did they translate it this?
Because there's like 10 words. Like you can like have the word sky and heaven come from the same word, and it's like, well, why are they putting sky over here in this verse and heaven over here in this verse?
So what drove that translation? And so if you say sky, then it gives you the idea that, well, God's up there in the sky somewhere. That's the direction you look. And instead of when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within, you go, oh, wait a second, it's in me, and so those things kind of drove our questions throughout studying, and as a young adult, 22, I guess.
Well, and just to kind of go like I didn't know him in his teen years, but I get to hear stories. And and it was so bad. They lived across the street from a Christian school that his sister and his you just said you weren't going. He was like, I'm not doing that. And the girls, if they hung out with him and his brother, they get demerits. So there was quite a bit of rebelliousness.
Yeah, I skipped the part of where I rebelled against the whole thing.
So you just took your father's work and took it another notch, another level.
Yeah, well, yeah. So there was a space where I didn't spirituality, God, whatever. No, I didn't even like. I'm not going there. You can't make me do that. But then I realized, when I started realizing the freedom, that really comes with it, then that changed everything.
What do you mean?
Where it wasn't, God is this, with this big giant foot trying to squash you.
George Carlin said it well. He said, "There's no big man in the sky with 10 rules, something like that, telling you if you don't follow them, you're gonna go to hell, burn forever."
But he loves you.
But he loves you though.
He's gonna squash you, and he loves you.
So anyway.
And it's like what, and I think it's I know for me, when I came to meet Randall, I'd gone through everything. I was trying everything. I grew up Presbyterian, so I didn't have a lot of baggage around Christianity that like he had at one point. There wasn't a lot of shame or hellfire and brimstone or anything like that. It was all you go to church because it's the right thing to do, but they're also in the Presbyterian, there's not as much devotion. And I was like literally born with this devotion. I was just in love with the divine. I just loved just singing, and I had my favorite hymn. And when I was 3 years old, I was baptized, and it was like I married God that day, you know. And I remember it. In fact, one of our albums has a picture of me on that day. You know, when I gave my life, I mean, that was like, no, just so connected through singing. And of course, but I was the weirdo, you know. Everybody else was it was very intellectual. Presbyterians, very intellectual, you know, and scholarly. And so nobody really knew what to do with me. And so I was always searching, and I would you know, try all these different churches. And I mean, I went from Mormon to, you know, Church of Christ and everything in between, and had to come to grips with, you know, I can't take all the dogma anymore. You know, I want freedom. And you know, and if there's not freedom in the divine, then I don't want to do this. And so I got like really real, and I had a little sit down, and I said, okay, you know, if and I say God, you know, there's such a,
There can be a lot attached.
You're gonna be a lot attached to that word. So, but I, you know, sat down and just had a conversation with the divine and said, you know, if you're for real, then I need to know that I know that I know that I know that I know, and reveal to me what it means to have a connection, and what is this right and wrong, and which way's the right way. And it just was this beautiful little path that just unfolded. It was, it actually came through the 12 steps, believe it or not, and then led me over to him. And I had given up music because I think, Daniel, you were a music major, and I was too. I mean, up until a certain point, and I couldn't. It was all classical, and I was more of musical theater. And it was hard. I went to Stephen F. Austin, and it was really hard. It was at that time, they were the top school, even above North Texas. And it was it was miserable, and I hated it. And I quit music forever. Yeah, I was like, done. I'm never singing again. Done. Never playing the piano again. Done. You know, and through this you know, kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and then coming back slowly, and meeting him at a spiritual meeting, and literally hearing an audible voice say, you're going to play music with him. And I didn't know who he was, didn't know anything about him. Yeah, and like 3 weeks later we were.
Wow.
You know, and so when I came to them, they were doing all these word studies, and they were getting into these ancient languages. And there was such power in that. It's like, oh my gosh, like we were translating the Bible ourselves, and it was totally like, we started finding all of these yogic principles. I mean, we didn't know they were yogic principles. We just knew they were something, because it said in the beginning, God created. Well, that word create actually means to cut down, to like take something like a tree or a piece of wood and to carve it. And we were like, well, if they're cutting down something, then what was there before? Like in our mind, it was like one creation and one ending. That was it. It was like, it was very linear. And then translating it, it opened us up to, you know, that idea of death and rebirth, and
that it was transformation.
Yeah, that was about transformation. And we were like, what does this mean? You know, like we're in our 20s, and we're spending our weekends with our few friends, just tearing this apart, going, what does this mean? And so through that's where we met our first Nada yoga teacher, and found Sanskrit.
Wow.
Now,
so I'm curious now, knowing that you all have had somewhat similar journeys, right? Starting off in music, and then really the spirituality sounds like was really what was underneath, like the base, right? Underneath all of the moves and the journey in your life is kind of like the spirituality, is the seeking. I'm curious about where you are now that you have had this journey, that you've discovered some ways in which you want to express the transformation, or show the transformation. Where would you say you are now compared to where you were when you found this path?
Yeah, I think integration is the word that comes to my mind. is before that like experience, before that journey, it was so segregated. And I think I can just feel that Kristin's going to have the same experience, as like trying to put those rules and like everything you like bring into that experience, like into your daily life, just also felt like inauthentic. Like I can remember this, and I have an example from present day, but I can remember like trying on this idea of like I'm sneezing or I'm hiccuping or I'm burping and saying like, oh devil, get out of me, like this is something holy and this body is meant for righteousness, and that's like not of God. And I can see the same thing now happen, and I could laugh about it now as well. It's like, well, that was really kind of silly. But I can also see that same pattern being repeated. I have a former middle school choir student that's now a single mom of 2 and is like on that same path. And I wish her the best. But I also see like in her social media posts, like her children are doing the same thing. Like it's that putting on of a facade instead of teaching me how to live authentically. And there was an element woven into that of sexuality for me as a gay man as well, in that like you can't be gay and live a spiritual life, when the reality is like maybe I can't be gay and live according to that doctrine, but like if I'm on that practice, that journey of self-discovery and self-enlightenment and finding how I can use my tools to make the world a better place, like again, that like right and wrong, like I knew what right and wrong was, and I knew that like I could be true to myself and still abide by those same moral and ethical principles. That's where I was like, this doesn't, like the scales are out of balance. So it was like, how can I rebalance these? So I think that's kind of where I am, is like that spiritual practice continues to change day by day. It's not so like regimented, like 2 hymns, a prayer, a sermon, and we're ready to move on, right? It's like maybe it's just sitting out in nature. I just came back from vacation and like sitting at the pool in Hawaii and going like, wow, this is so cool. And I've been to Hawaii a number of times, but to see it from a different perspective, from 41 and married for 6 years and moving to the UK in a month, like looking at it from, this is the last time I'm going to see this place. Like, what do I want to stay with me? Like, that's still a spiritual experience.
Absolutely. I love that. The idea of being true to yourself and integrating. I mean, and the process never ends, right? And if what you were saying earlier about creation being something that is transformed continuously, right? We take something in, we're like, okay, out with the old, into the new, or figuring out a way to weave the two together. I think it's kind of fascinating to consider, when you think about the world. I know for myself, every once in a while, I've traveled a lot. There are a lot more countries in the world for me to see for sure. But I remember in the 31 countries that I visited thus far in my lifetime, that every single one of them had a sacred moment. And when I'm asked, what's your favorite, or where's your favorite place to go, or what would you recommend? I'm like, actually, there's not one place, because every moment is a sacred opportunity, basically. It's a sacred opportunity. Maybe it's not always a sacred moment, but it's an opportunity for the sacred to enter, whether that's in a conversation or in a meal or in some sort of scenery. And I find myself, this is so silly, but my computer will have these what do you call it? Wallpapers, right? They come up every once in a while. It's a fresh one. And I'm always like, that looks like, and then when you can, click on the link to see where it actually is, like, oh, that was in China. Wow. And the fact that we have this entire planet, provides opportunity to meet with the sacred. Entire planet. And sometimes in just a wallpaper, I can get that. It doesn't even have to be in real life. So yes, I love this idea of integrating. That's what it looks like. I think for me is, as I integrate my spirituality, is just taking these moments. Now I resist some sacred moments, to be true, to be sure. There's someone like, I don't want that. I'm not ready for that. I'm tired. I have too much to do. That's not the way I want it. Right. So I may resist the sacred in those moments. But thank you for the reminder.
Well, but it really it's that integration of our humanity and our divinity.
Yeah.
Bringing the two together without, like, there's one thing I was telling one of my students the other day was, when you come to a place where you, in your humanity, you do something stupid, you offend someone, or you just weren't, and when you can do it, and without that judgment, that harsh judgment, and you just recognize where the ego had taken charge, and it's not a big deal. It's like there's something that happens in the ego where the ego begins to, like, relax, and we begin to trust ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what I know. For me, that's what integrating all of the East and the West, and coming to this, that it really comes down to yoga, which is union with the truth of who we are, and what does that mean? And I think at first, we just kind of want to throw out our humanity, and it's like, oh, I'm all one with everything, and, but the truth is there's that humanity, and there's like that. That's what keeps, for me, it's like what reminds me to keep that humility, that it's okay, that I'll never know. In fact, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. It's like you said, like, where are you now versus where were you then? I feel like I know a whole lot less, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Because it is about the heart, it's like that humanity coming up from below, and that divinity from above, and that marriage in the heart, where we, like I think of Randall, there's probably no other man on this planet that could, like, put up with me. It's like, like, because there's a fire, but then there's also this introvertedness at the same time, and and there's such compassion, and it's like there's one of the songs that he wrote called "Remember Me." It's on one of our other albums. I remember he had written that for me after I'd been going through a really hard time, and when he sang it to me, I realized how much I must love myself in order to have him here, to draw that in. And it was like,
say that again.
Well, I realized how much I must love myself in order to have manifested and to have brought him in to do that for me. And it made me relax a little bit, because sometimes it's like being spiritual. It's like we have to be on, and it's become so judgy. Everybody's like judging how good, how spiritual you are, and how not, you know what I mean? And it's like, coming to that place of being able to relax and to let, ourselves, and in turn, and letting ourselves, others, be human, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world, and it's just not the end of the world, and that's, I don't know,
it's the beginning of the world.
It is the beginning of the world. It's like the beginning of real life. It's not fun to judge ourselves or to judge other people. It's so much more fun to love them. It's so much more fun to connect. And to be able to look upon ourselves endearingly, and to look upon others endearingly, even, with the making mistakes. I feel like our culture isn't allowing for that. There's this whole idea of perfectionism versus the perfection in the imperfection. And I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say this, because I know I literally had a conversation about this earlier today with somebody. I introduce people all the time. I feel like being a connector, it comes very naturally to me. And I didn't realize consciously, I'm sure subconsciously, I was well aware, but I didn't realize that I had several expectations of how those were supposed to go, right? Clearly, I have a podcast dedicated to doing just that. And there have been moments where others have introduced or wanted to introduce people to me that are not done in the way that I would typically do it. And I find myself choosing not to love in that moment. Like, you're not doing it right.
It's like this. It's so cute. Like, when we can look at, It's like when we do something like when I act up, I can say, that was really, I don't know who said that, Randall. I'm really sorry. And it's like when we get into a practice of being easy
Yeah.
with ourselves in those moments and knowing that, yeah, we're going to have human moments. It's not excusing things or that we don't take responsibility, but it's doing it with such ease and grace and love. Like I realized I didn't really know what grace. I'm like I feel like I'm just beginning
Yeah.
to experience what grace is.
Mm.
Like intellectually, I felt like I
Yeah.
thought it. One of my teachers used to say, "Never assume you know the most basic of things."
Mm.
And grace was that's one of those that I'm like, oh, grace is when you can just be and not be on edge and walking around on
Yeah.
eggshells that I'm going to say the wrong thing and
Yeah.
and offend. And if I offend, it's like, okay, you offended, now make it right.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be this whole big giant middle school war. you know?
I think there is something to be said for setting the groundwork, because I do find, not that there's a right way to do this, but there is some level of psychological safety that has to be in place for us to really get the most out of any moment. If nothing else, for us to feel safe enough to be open, right? To be ourselves. So, when you said that how much you must love yourself, I think that also comes with, you said it in the context of meeting, your mate, but I think in meeting anybody or in any experience, we must love ourselves so much to have grace for whatever comes out of my mouth. I don't know what I'm going to say or how I'm going to react, if I'm going to like it or not like it. Heck, I don't even know if I'm going to like what I ordered from the waiter, right, for the meal. But if I love myself enough, I will just allow myself the moment and be okay with it, right? Or like you said, be fun or be easy. Randall, I want to pull you in here. So I'm curious. Kristin said a lot about you here. So I'm curious about what jumps out to you, or what do you find resonates for you in creating these opportunities to either connect with people or connect with yourself?
What jumps out?
Yeah.
Well, it's always a learning experience, and as a musician, as a I write this most of the lyrics and everything, um, and that's how I kind of translate things. So in meeting people and challenges and along the way, it tends to come and be integrated through the sound, through the music that I write. Um,
Mm.
and I wanted to say earlier about the integration and throwing babies out with the bathwater and everything is, as part of the time I tried to
Terrible visual, by the way. Throwing babies out with bathwater, but yes.
Well,
I
I
know,
guess
I know.
it's something that you shouldn't do, right? Because there's some good stuff in there, and it is with every experience. Growing up, the part I tried to brush over earlier, I was kind of, as a teenager, in the, like, I guess you might call it the hip hop scene, kind of, and
He is from the hood.
well, but it was kind of a rough, there's a lot that goes along with that, gangsta rap, and you know and these images that the way you think you're supposed to be, and uh, so growing up, once I sort of saw the light, I guess, and knew which direction I needed to go, I wanted to throw every bit of that out. So I threw out the whole rap thing. I used to rap at some parties and things like that, but I threw it out. So, but then I realized one day that was part of who I am right now, this journey, and the people that I met, the interactions that I had, those were all opportunities, like you said, for expansion, for growth, and so obviously now, if you listen to it, I've integrated those things back into the music, and it's something that I really feel free doing, like there's something about the rap that, like, just
Yeah.
it frees me,
Mm.
the singing does too, but the rap, I don't know, it's just something about it that lets me express some in Blue Sky, where the preacher in me kind of comes out, where, it sounds like a preacher, just a, I don't know. But
Freedom.
I want to say, just I think that's how it is. Like the interactions that we have with each other and the patterns that you see that come up within you and interacting with other people, that definitely influences the music. And yeah.
All right, I'm going to come back to this, but Randall, I'm going to ask you, if you were to create a song based on this interaction, I would love to hear what it would sound like, or what elements would you pull into a song. So I'll come back in a second. Daniel, I know you have a list of questions, so I want you to pick a question from your list and throw it out there and see what happens.
Okay. This one's like a totally random one. Change everything up. What's an unpopular opinion that you have? It doesn't even have to be related to anything we're talking about.
Open up a can of worms. Well, dispelling dogma is kind of our thing.
Yeah.
I know that, in kind of piggybacking on what we were talking about earlier, kind of moving from the solely, old fundamental Christian to the Eastern, we thought that there was freedom in the Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? There's dogma there too. And
humans.
Yeah. And I think that was a huge realization, just dispelling the dogma and everything. And and coming back to these sacred archetypes of how our humanity and divinity interact. They're ancient, I mean, you can go to like into the Ramayana and you can see like everything that's happened throughout 2020 and 20, all that. You can see how the Ramayana is being replayed out throughout. And I think, it's never, anything great is never what you think it is. And I think in focusing on what connects has been, because I'll tell you this, I have many different opinions politically that don't go along with what most of our friends, but that to me, that's confined to that individual self rather than the collective. And I like to look at the collective and how can I strengthen the collective. And if my personal views and opinions, as long as I'm able to be authentic and to build up the connection, then it seems like unpopular opinions, like they all kind of dissipate. Because what I've realized is I feel like everybody wants the same thing.
When you go down deep enough, yeah, absolutely.
Like we all want love, and we all want to be seen, and our our ego believes it knows the one and only way. And it doesn't necessarily allow for multiple, like one of the things that we've really been studying has been quantum physics. That's kind of we've got a project we're doing with our Sanskrit and everything, and quantum physics, and looking at quantum physics and how really to even think that we live in just a 3D matrix of hell is absurd. That this objective 3D world doesn't really exist. That the person observing changes the nature of everything. And so I've been considering, like, because I have an unpopular opinion. My neighbor over here has this opinion that's not popular with me, but what's it really, how much of this is what I'm projecting,
The
And
observer is the one that has the impact on what is observed.
yeah, the observer is because like if you look at I don't know if you guys know much about the waves and particles and how
Oh boy.
yeah, you get into, that's a whole that's some deep stuff, and you're like there's nothing concrete. And so like this whole all of this craziness in the last couple of years has brought me to this is what I've been contemplating. Like what if there are multiple realities going on at once?
And there are.
And what if instead of being offended because somebody else's opinion doesn't agree with mine, what if what they're saying in their world is true? Like can we have two things coming? I don't know, but what it does is it's helping me to look at like maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture.
To ease off a little
maybe
bit. Have more grace. Have more grace.
And
so I'm sorry, Kristen. I know we're running out of time. I do want to have at least one more question. I appreciate. Randall, do you have a question for Daniel?
Well, I think the questions that we had
were
kind of already. Well, I'd love to know what's become of the music.
Yeah, that's a great question. You totally hit on it. I was noticing this similarity between all of us. Is there's something that we've all started with that we were so passionate about and in some way moved away from it and have come back to some form of it in another way. So like you were saying, Kristin, being a musical theater nut and then never doing music again, and then here you are in music again, and Randall leaving this Christian background but finding spirituality in another way. So for me, it's been a reinterpreting of what I learned from music. So I still have a passion for it and still enjoy singing and find that same connection, like you said, Kristin, at 3 years old, where I feel connected with something outside of myself. But what it's led me to is I've realized that the music was the vehicle, what my place in this world is to be a teacher and to help other people learn and create experiences. So that aha moment came whenever I'm like, hey, I'm not doing music anymore. Let's teach yoga. And I'm like, Daniel, you're doing the exact same thing. It's just a different medium. And now even moving on from yoga a bit, it's been hard to sustain through the pandemic. So how can I continue to use those skills and that background? And even the experience of having a PhD and asking questions, that was my guru moment, with your dad, in a way of having somebody that really taught me how to ask questions and to analyze what was really going on. And I keep saying to people, that skill of analysis, it translates to whatever you take on, whether it's language, whether it's to numbers for a business, whether it's looking at bodies. Yeah, it's all the same. So I haven't, you said, I haven't touched a piano in 7.5 years. Yeah.
That makes my heart sad.
Okay, I sing every day. I sing every day at work. And it's one of those things, I have customers at Lululemon oh, you have a nice voice. And I'm like, oh, was I singing? I didn't even realize it. But it's that way for me to just have fun and still feel connected and keep me moving. So
maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration here.
I know.
I recommend that everyone sing every day. I mean,
yes,
it just makes you feel better.
Yes.
I mean, you're breathing too. It's a breathing practice as well. So.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I joined a choir this year. I haven't sung in forever, and I'm not the soloist type singer. I love choral music. I was in university choir, church choirs throughout my lifetime, and there's a local choir, Credo Choir here that sings out of UTD. And it was so funny during the holiday season because I really like singing. I was listening to Handel's Messiah. And I started singing along, and I'm like, I really wish I could be in a choir that sings this, because I really feel like I want to learn it. I want to have some context to sing it during holidays. So, and I Googled it. I'm like, I know it's too late now, but maybe next year. And they had a Messiah sing-along happening like blocks from where I live. And it was amazing. My mom was here visiting, so she and I went, and we bought the score, and we sang along the best we could. And then in the same Google search, I also found local choir. I'm like, oh, Credo Choir, University of Texas in Dallas? What? So it's a local community choir. There's like 170 people in it.
Wow.
And we practiced 3 hours every other Sunday. And I just came back from choir practice yesterday. It was amazing. It was so cool just to experience. To your point, Randall, I think there's a level of expression that comes through music. And I'm like, I know how to read music. I'm not perfect. I used to take piano years and years ago. But what was interesting is this particular type of music. I mean, it's all over, right? There's some choral music, there's some classical sounding. There's some things from different backgrounds, Buddhist, we're singing a Buddhist song. But I found that I use my ears a lot. I speak a lot in my work. But there's something that when it's translated into music through song, there's like, it accesses it's an access to a different part of me, and even other skills that I've forgotten I had, right? So talk about integration. Wow. I mean, we've just started to peel back the onion, and we're close to their closing time soon, but I'm curious about just this experience of meeting each other. You obviously had tons of similarities and connections, not only the 60 Facebook friends, mutual friends that you had, but I'd love for the three of you to share, what are you taking away from this conversation that you'd like to share with us?
I think the first thing that jumps out at me is back to what Kristin said about one light, many forms. And as I'm preparing to move to a different country and to like kind of be rebirthed even, if you will, like doing the same job or doing a new job in a new place, like how can I look at those people through the eyes of like, we're all having the same experience? Like the thread I keep hearing through everything we've said is that we're human beings we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So how can I create space for myself, my husband, and the people that I meet to have like a more spiritual experience and allow that humanness to come forward as well? And then the other word that keeps sticking out to me is like, and by doing that, I know that I'll create freedom in my life. And one of my like kind of mantra, if you will, or like focus has been for the past several years of I have everything I need to be successful, at ease, and comfortable. And so like even that, like reminding myself that it's not always externals, that resting in that spiritual flow allows that channel to freely flow and come out of the present moment. So thanks for sharing that perspective, helping me realign.
Go transform UK.
Uh-huh.
All right, Kristin, Randall, what are you taking away?
I'm taking away that I really love this forum. I love what you've created here. This is a great. I listened to a few of your other ones over last few days, but I just love this idea, the connecting people together
Deliberately.
Yeah, I think it's really great. I think, why didn't I think of this? But
you have your own form.
and I've had, this has been, like you said, it's too short, really. I mean, we could
sit on here all day long.
We could chat, yeah. But
because I'm like, there's still so much I want to know about you, Daniel.
Yeah, so that's kind of, we're incomplete, I guess, but that leaves more, more to come. So I don't know. I really enjoyed this interaction.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Kristin, what about for you?
Me too. This is just leaving me wanting more. And excited to connect more deeply, Daniel. In whatever way. And why? Because this is exciting, and I know you're moving and all, but unfortunately, we had a world tour, and our first UK tour had to be canceled in
Oh,
2020. But everything happens as it needs to happen for our greatest expansion. So this is just going to give us one more reason and one more person to make sure that connect with when we go over.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's funny because wouldn't it be funny? Like you've been living in the same backyard. We're in Fort Worth. You're in Dallas. We actually meet in person in the UK.
The number of people over the past year that I've made friends with that live in Canada or live in California that I will meet whenever I move over there. Amazing. Yeah. And like, I so appreciate that too. I can also say, like, sometimes being in the virtual world, people have this assumption that connection can't happen, like authentic connection can't happen. And I'm like, the other side of that is it can happen when you're intentional and when you're present.
Absolutely.
Because authentic connection cannot happen when you're face to face as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, to the point, Randall and Kristin, you guys mentioned that if you went in to that event with the intention of connecting, everything falls into place, right? All the opportunities that show up with that intention are now feasible. Whereas, yeah, I've been to places where I'm just like, I'm in and out. I don't even want to get, I don't know about anybody here. I don't care about that right now. I'm focused on the particular goal. And I appreciate that because in this forum, I have to hold both, right? Because we could do an episode for 2 hours and most people probably would have tuned out at this point. Maybe, but I thought, you know what, let's do an intentional connection. And hopefully, like you both have now, all three of you have mentioned, connecting beyond this. Like I said, maybe a collaboration in place. I still want to hear from Randall. If you were to create a song based on this experience, what would it be? What would it be called? What elements would you infuse it with? Anything?
Well, certainly it would have to do with connection. I mean, and coming in to something, I guess, where you're not sure how it's gonna be, and then just everything being the heart connection being flowing, And so it would have that feel, and it could be in Sanskrit though, so
Okay.
you have to feel it if you didn't know what the words meant. But that's kind of what our what Sanskrit's all about anyway. It's a language of feeling rather than translation.
Good interpretation. Got it.
Something like that.
So if you are ever inspired to write a song about this experience, I'm not mad at you if you do, so just saying, putting it out there.
Trust
don't force it. Don't force
That's
it.
what I'm hearing.
I'm so grateful to all three of you for having said yes, for the opportunity to not only get to know you even better, but also for you all to get to know each other and hopefully pour into each other well beyond this. And I don't take for granted that even this moment in time could not only impact the three of you, but also people that you interact with as a result, right?
Yeah.
To change the observer, if you will.
It's the ripple effect.
100%.
And putting those intentional love connection ripples, may it affect all beings, and raise the vibe, raise the level of connection and authenticity.
Raise your voice.
Yeah,
raise your words. I have it. Yes, yes.
Yay! I love it.
I saw that on your wrist there. It's one of the songs on the Roots of Revolution album. Lovely. Any final words? I will make sure I'll put the golden shoes link so people can hear the song. I'll make sure that I put the album as well so people know how to reach to you. And then Daniel, any information you'd like for us to have? I know you're in transition too, but anything you'd like for us to publish, for me to put into the show notes, I will do so. But what final words do you all have before we sign off?
Well, I'm just deeply, deeply grateful for this connection. My little human side is a little sad and throwing a fit that our connection didn't come sooner and that you're moving. But I also know that there must be something much more grand in store for a relationship here and a new friendship. I'm just deeply grateful, to not only for the new friendship with Daniel, but also deepening with you, Valerie. So. Just
I love
thank
that.
you. Thank you for including us and
Mm.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
I feel I feel like I already know you, Daniel. I mean, that's like we've met before. I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's more than 3 dimensions. We already said that.
Oh.
Trust the connection, though. Like Daniel said, that's I think that's the takeaway too for me. Trust the connection.
For sure.
Trust the connection.
Daniel, any final?
I think everybody said it already.
Said it all. Hey.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you all 3 again so much. Everyone that's tuned in for this beautiful conversation. I hope that you found yourselves in another dimension as a result. A connection with the divine 4, at least for this moment.
We should do it again.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Like once you move to the UK, like kind of come back and like,
ooh,
like a revisit. Yeah.
Once you get your accent, then we can do another one. Right?
Go get your accent. Brilliant.
On the telly.
It's brilliant.
On my mobile.
Any of my listeners and viewers from the UK, please don't be offended. This is an opportunity to see another cut of humanity in form. I'm so grateful. Thank you all for tuning in to yet another episode of Not Quite Strangers. Please do subscribe if you'd like to get this episode and many others directly in your inbox. Go to www.notquitestrangers.com so you won't miss a single episode. I'm so grateful that you are part of our community of strangers. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.
All right.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.